Mr. Thorstein,
What?
you are a Viking, are you not?
No.
I beg your pardon?
I pardon you.
What do you mean you are not a Viking?
I'm from Scotland.
Oh yes, I got it. That's a very interesting point actually, and I think I'm going to use that in this video. But I was going to tell you about those horns of yours.
Hey, what of it?
Did your wife give you those?
What?
I mean, Vikings didn't have horns in their helmets. I mean, everybody knows that by now.
Oh, yes, you keep telling me that.
Well, but there are other misconceptions, and that's actually what I'm going to talk about today. So, let's do this. Hello friends, my name is Ari Thurger, and today I'm going to talk about 5 of the major misconceptions people have about the Vikings. Well, you might be wondering, what is a Christmas tree doing in the background in the middle of February? Well, this video was recorded in December 2 months ago. Isn't it weird that you are watching me as I was 2 months ago? Maybe I'm dead? Hello from beyond the grave. Enough of silliness, let's get started. Since the 19th century, medieval Scandinavia has been portrayed in a particular manner and mostly focused on the Viking period. A general idea of Scandinavian societies was built, and this happens to a lot of historical accounts, exaggerations of reality, emphasizing a particular idea, and loads of fiction passed down from generation to generation to the point it becomes an historical truth. So, the first major misconception people have about the Vikings is that they were a people. In the medieval sources, the term Viking is related to maritime activities, especially for piracy. After the 19th century, and especially due to the influences of Romanticism, the term became associated to all Scandinavian inhabitants that lived between the 8th and the 11th centuries. And the term started to generally be used amongst academics and by the media. Although this term can be used if you apply it to a way of life guided by cultural practices during the Viking period, for instance, looting and exploitation. But applying this concept in ethnical terms is an error. You see, not every Nordic was a Viking, but every Viking was a Nordic. So you can use the term to refer to certain activities by the Norse, especially related to seafaring and raiding, but you can't label a medieval Scandinavian person as a Viking, nor can you label a sort of structure as being Viking. The second misconception is that the Vikings drank from skulls. This is a stereotype that you can still see in many movies, animations, literature, and the media does love to spread that. This misconception began in the Middle Ages when Christian writers blended the references contained within mythological accounts and literature and with the historical society of the Norse. I mean, the accounts from literary and mythical sources such as the Saga of the Volsungs were transferred to reality as if in Nordic society people really behaved as it says in the myths. Here on YouTube, for instance, I have seen videos saying that the Vikings did drink from skulls, which is an historical fact, and even nowadays people still celebrate and drink by saying skull, and that this word is an old reminder which meant skull. Skull is Old Norse for bowl, for cup, and it has nothing to do with drinking from skulls. This was never proven by archaeology nor history. The third misconception: the Nordics were tall, huge, monstrous, muscular creatures. This might seem totally silly, but there is still this idea among many people and it's still being spread a lot. A canonical image of the Norse was developed by some countries during the 19th century. One of the images created was the depiction of the Norse as being tall, brutal, murderous, violent, with a large body and similar to ancient inhabitants of prehistory or uncivilized savages, only wearing animal skins and they themselves having an animal behavior. Part of this stereotype has been transferred to modern fiction, various physical and behavioral exaggerations due to the fact that the first historical records of the Vikings were written by their victims. Europe wasn't prepared to face this calamity and most were caught with their pants down. the fear of Viking attacks became impossible to bear, and Christians, who at some point lived in total peace and before the Vikings came, portrayed the Vikings precisely as the monstrous disturbers of peace and bringing with them the end of days. Poor Christian priests, all they wanted was to be left alone. The fourth misconception is that the medieval Scandinavian incursions arrived in South America. This is an historical mistake created during the 19th century. Yes, the 19th century was indeed a period of a lot of gibberish. Anyway, this historical mistake that the Norse would have arrived in Central and South America, especially in the Brazilian coast and the Amazon, was an historical mistake that a lot of people, including academics, still believe without questioning actual events. This theory does not currently have any historiographic and archaeological support. The fifth misconception, and the last one: every Viking was a pagan. Much of the Scandinavian societies during the Viking Age were composed by polytheistic religions before the introduction of Christianity. But the Vikings were no strangers to Christianity, and in fact, they had had contact with other religious realities such as Islam and even Buddhism. People may not be aware of this, but there were as many Christian Vikings as there were pagan Vikings, all depending on the century you look at. Also, there were a huge amount of Viking Age Scandinavians who were both at once. That's the thing with polytheistic Norse. Adding yet another god into the pantheon didn't hurt. It was just beneficial. For instance, Leif Erikson, the discoverer of Vinland in the Icelandic sagas, was Christian, as well as Olaf Tryggvason, a very famous mercenary and pirate before becoming a king. Alright friends, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed this tiny video. And on the next one I will speak about 5 other misconceptions people have about the Vikings, but turn to weaponry. Well, once again, I hope you have enjoyed this video. See you on the next one, and tack för idag.